time up. Deep right field. Down the line it goes. Castellanos is out of room. It's out of room. Runner goes. 3-2 pitch hit down the line. Is it fair? It is a fair ball. Into the corner. Off and running. Chu. Yu Chang around third. He's going to score easily. And into second. Hit hard. Hit deep. Up and out. Goes Ahmed Rosario. And there's a fly ball. Left field. It's deep. It's up. It's gone to the porch. Hit pretty well. Deep left center field. It is gone to Souvenir City.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Guardians of the CLE podcast. I'm your host, Max Goldstein, joined as always by my co-host, Mel Kirby. And rough weekend for Cleveland sports, Mel. The Cleveland Guardians got swept by the San Francisco Giants on a rough 3-game stretch. Cleveland Cavaliers got eliminated from the playoffs by the Atlanta Hawks on Friday night. Blues Day Tuesday, as I just said. Been a couple rough days here as well because inclement weather in Cleveland has disallowed the Guardians and the White Sox to begin their series. But Mel, I want to hear your thoughts on this past weekend. Wasn't really able to fill in too much, but I mean, after seeing everything, pretty rough stretch.
I was just thinking today, the excitement, like me and I'm sure most people in the city had leading into Friday. Like, this is going to be great. The Cavs got a playing game. They should take care of the Hawks. Then you got the Guardians home opener next door, kind of a fun series against a National League team. And there was just so much excitement in the city. The weather was nice. And then it's like the Cavs lost. The Guardians, left their bats in Cincinnati and it fizzled, it fizzled quickly, but it's a young team. Rodon has always dominated this team, whether they're the Indians, the Guardians. Carlos Rodon always has our number, but it's a young team who faced some really good pitching, and they're going to learn from it. And it's important to remember, I wrote an article about it a little while ago, but it's like we kind of got to look at most of this season as like a big tryout for next season. They're going to start with these guys that they have here, and they're going to see what they have, and then there's the next wave of guys that they got to see at AAA. And it started with Josh Naylor coming off the injured list on Friday, and Yu Chang went to the injured list with, basically just didn't have any more options yet, but they weren't ready to DFA him. So you got like a phantom injury, so you can use the injured list to buy yourself some time. So
yeah, I mean, as many lowlights as I should say there were this weekend. There were definitely some highlights as well. Looking at your background for today's episode, you got Jose Ramirez up on the well-known poster out in Cleveland, owned by Sherwin-Williams. Jose Ramirez, though, named AL Player of the Week. He batted .457, hit 3 home runs, and he leads the MLB currently in RBIs with 15. He also added 4 doubles, down that stretch. I mean, wow. Contract came right at the right time, and he's making himself known right off the bat this season, no pun intended. But, AL Player of the Week, kind of sugarcoats the rough couple games we had against the Giants, but couldn't say enough about the progress that he's showing this season. And same hold Jose for us.
Yeah, it's just Jose doing Jose things. And, it's important to note, too, that he's doing this with no protection behind him right now because Fran Mill's still struggling, and he's typically a slow starter. There was a shortened spring, so I'm not going to read too much into it yet, but, he's leading the team with 40 at-bats and has 15 strikeouts already, which is 37.5%, and he's hitting only 157 or 150, but Jose's still managing to just mash the baseball right now. And, looking back to Friday, that was one of the highlights of Friday. Like, he was so excited. Like, he had the biggest smile on his face signing this contract. He was tweeting for like the first time ever, his age. It's usually his agent running it, but like that seemed like some Jose humor. The little video he posted where, he put Tito and all their teammates' heads on, that clip. And it's just like my background says, like, this kid from the Dominican Republic is choosing to call Cleveland home, and he couldn't be happier about it. Like, that's why I think it's, there's still negative people out there who are like, oh, he's still going to get traded. But like, he made sure there was a no trade clause in this deal. Like, he did not like the trade rumors surrounding him. Like, this dude wants to retire a Cleveland Guardian. And, we just have to embrace that and not wait for the next shoe to drop. Like, he is going to be probably top 5 in MVP again. He's, if not the best, one of the top 2 third basemen in the entire game of baseball, and he wants to play in Cleveland. And I just think that's so cool, and we're so lucky to have him.
Yeah, we're incredibly lucky to have him, and the contract came right at the right time. We were reaching the end of our patience. We were getting a little nervous as the season was starting to begin, but they got it done. And just to see him when we returned to Cleveland after that series in Cincinnati, actually sign the contract here, just put the ribbon on it, and icing on the cake, and it was just it was a great weekend for Cleveland baseball. Although we did drop the series, we did get swept, so it was pretty ugly when it comes to wins and losses, but a great way to open the year with him.
I always said they'd announce it right around the home opener. They want to maximize that good press, like get some buzz and some excitement heading into that opening series to try to sell some tickets. And I mean, it worked. There was definitely some buzz. It generated that excitement.
And speaking of excitement, we had one of our favorites back on the field. Josh Naylor made his return to the lineup. Throughout the weekend, he went 2 for 6 with a walk and a strikeout. He played 1 game at first base, 1 in right field. I'm sure Andre Knott was as hyped up as anybody else. I mean, Mel, how did you feel seeing him back on the field and in the clubhouse with the guys?
Yeah, like I've always said, I think just having his energy around the team, is valuable in itself. And just seeing him walk in, to the clubhouse that day, he was excited to be back. He's been very active around the team, even being on the injured list. But, I think it was big to see his leg hold up in right field, too. I like that they kind of gave him 1 game at first and eased him back in, and then he went into right field, So I think that's going to be important because if his leg can hold up, he's got to be getting the majority of at-bats out in right field at this point, I would think.
Yeah, I would think the same as well. And hopefully he can just continue to progress throughout these first couple months of the season. Bottom line is he's back, and he's on the field. He's healthy. So it's just really great to see. And I'm sure everybody within the clubhouse would say the same. But just to go back on some of the lowlights of the series here, it came down to no offense and bad defense. I mean, it's just a recipe for disaster. What were the things that stood out the most, do you think, that, slipped away from us during this series? I know the Sunday game, the third game of the series, was kind of a blowout, right? But we'll get to that later on in the podcast. But those first 2 games, I believe it was a 4-1 final and then 4-2. If I'm not mistaken. So where were the missed opportunities there in your mind?
So I'd say specifically talking about Friday, it's just, and Saturday even, it's the lack of timely hitting. And as we know, like watching a baseball team for a full 162 game season, it's going to come and it's going to go. Obviously, they were riding the wave in, Kansas City and Cincinnati against some pretty bad pitching staffs. It got some guys some confidence, but you face the best pitching they've seen thus far, and it was a lot harder for them to come by that timely hit. And I would think also just the uncharacteristic miscues on defense. Jose had a throwing error in this series. They played Owen Miller at second base, and he was just out of place. He misplayed a 1-hopper, tried to backhand it, went off his glove. They had double play. They could not buy a double play to save their lives. It was a struggle. Bobby Bradley didn't look great at first base. And when he's not hitting, he's not really providing you much of anything else. When, he's not giving you that power, he's hurting you defensively. He had a ball get stuck in his glove. And, back to Owen Miller, just kind of a weird play on that double play over the weekend where the bases were loaded and Owen Miller kind of broke in. He was playing in a little bit because the bases were loaded. That's where you should be. But the ball was hit and he kind of broke in a little bit more, and he didn't get back to the bag in time for Ahmed to complete the double play, which, it like split Twitter right down the middle. It's like, was it Ahmed's fault? You're taught to kind of lead the guy back to the base with the ball, but Ahmed just didn't throw it. But again, Owen broke in a little bit more. So again, it's just these like miscommunications on defense. And I think a lot of it has to do with like, we know this team likes guys who can play multiple positions, right? But then you have, Owen Miller was really thriving at first base, and you move him over to second base and he just looked out of sorts. He's a new first baseman, finally was getting comfortable there, and you're moving him back to second. Sometimes with a young kid, you kind of got to just pick a position for him and let him play. And we're kind of seeing the same thing with Andres Jimenez too. He's, they're picking and choosing where they play him. And I get it. They don't really want to play him against lefties, but again, he's a 23-year-old kid. And when he was getting pretty regular at bats, he was hitting in the 290s. He hasn't been playing as much as of late, and he's down into the 230s. And that's just simply because he's not getting those consistent at bats. So I think that's one thing that could kind of help this team defensively, is if they kind of knew where they were going to be penciled in the lineup every day.
Right. And, I like how you bring up Owen Miller at second base, how it wasn't exactly the best fit. He kind of didn't look as if he was as comfortable as he was on the other side of the diamond. But when it comes to Ernie Clement, he's usually finding himself over there in the middle infield. And just this past weekend, you were talking about timely hitting. So Clement was pitch hitting, especially in this in the Saturday game is the one I'm specifically highlighting. Clement was pitch hitting for Andres Jimenez late in the game, and he left 5 guys on base in only 2 at bats. So, as much as I love Ernie Clement and what he can provide, just his energy and his enthusiasm off the bench, he's got to become more consistent within that role of being a late game clutch hitter if he wants to find himself playing every single day in this lineup.
Especially when your pitchers are pretty much keeping you in every game.
Yeah.
I know, like Friday, for example, like Plesac, obviously he's going against Rodon, so it's like he almost needs to be perfect to keep up with Rodon. Like Carlos Rodon went 7 innings, only gave up 2 hits and struck out 9. Plesac went 5 innings. Again, probably could have came out for the 6th if there weren't the errors behind him that forced him to stay, it prolonged innings. He gave up 7 hits, 4 strikeouts, but he did allow the 2 solo home runs. And, that's kind of always been the issue with Zach Plesac, is the long ball. And, his line looks pretty decent, but he was getting hammered on Friday night. Like there were a ton of warning track fly balls. And, the exit velocity these Giants were hitting with were like well over 100 miles an hour, and they're going right to the base of the wall. So, they had the right approach, wrong night. A cold night in Cleveland, those balls were kind of dying at the warning track. But, we don't need to really nitpick Zach Plesac. The bottom line is he gave us a chance to win the game. And they were getting hit. They were getting on base. They can work their walks. They can get singles. They can typically move the guy over. It just wasn't clicking for them this weekend. I don't know if they're pressing, they get down early, they try to do too much. But it's not, they didn't have lack of opportunities. Let's put it that way. You mentioned that on Saturday. It's like you only score 2 runs on 8 hits on Saturday. That's a problem. Someone's got to come up with that big hit to kind of get these guys in, because
Right.
Obviously Stephen Kwan came back down to earth a little bit this weekend. He wasn't going to continue with that ridiculous clip he was hitting at the first week of the season. But, overall, Miles Straw, Kwan, and Jose are getting on base. They're doing their part. It's up to 4, 5, 6 to drive them in. And that's kind of the weird thing about this lineup this year is, last year it's like the lineup just died after Franmil. Right? It's like 1 through 4 was fine. 5 through 9 gave you absolutely nothing. This year, the way I'm seeing it is like 1 through, obviously 1 through 3 is fantastic. Franmil's struggling a little bit.
Right.
Ahmed's pretty much hitting it, a basic league average hitter. But then Owen Miller is really given like that 6-hole, 6, 7, depending where they put him. He's really bringing that like ability to, drive the ball and drive those guys in. It's just, think if Franmil could start hitting,
Right.
then it's really going to extend this lineup, and that's going to be huge for them. And that's why I still think this lineup can have some success, as they continue warming up and the weather gets warmer.
Right. And when speaking about Front Mill, usually, we've spoken about this in the past. He does have a start, just as Jose Ramirez has in a couple seasons here in recent years. He starts slow, but then he finds his stride. But winning the AL Player of the Week in the first week of the season, I think he's doing just fine right now. But Front Mill Reyes, he seems really lost, right? He's leading the team in at bats with 40. But he also has 15 strikeouts, which
He's
is a
off
37.5% K rate. Right. He's hitting 150.
He's swinging off his back foot. It almost looks like he's swinging with one arm. He's like letting one arm off the bat. He's the type and I think that's why Tito put him in right field on Sunday to kind of get his mind off hitting. We'll see them do that sometimes because, you're a DH, your only job is to hit. You could get just consumed with how do I get that hit? How can I bring something to this lineup? So I think he threw him out in right field Sunday to try to distract him a little bit from his offensive struggles. But hopefully this 2-day, game postponements will kind of give him a chance to mentally reset because, we talk about it with guys in basketball a lot. It's like when their shots fall in, they're unstoppable. Like Jetty on the Cavs. It's like when that shot's fallen, they're a different player than when, they can't hit a shot at all and their confidence is shot. And Franmil's that kind of hitter. It's like when he's on, we know he's on. Like he's one of the best hitters in baseball when his confidence is up. But when he's in one of these kind of, down patches, these streaks where he just isn't having success, it eats at him. And you can see it in his body language, just kind of the dejection when he walks back to the dugout. And, just look out, league, when he finally flips that switch, because it's going to be trouble.
He needs to start sitting in between Steven Kwan, Owen Miller, and Jose Ramirez on the bench. I think that would be a good way to break the little
pick up something.
But even when he is getting on base, it doesn't seem exactly like the same old Front He's not roping balls off the left field wall, right? Yeah. He's getting singles up the middle. I think he had one double down the alley. Fine, that was classic Front Mill, but he's got to get back into it. I certainly think he will. Especially, you say this all the time, Mel. When the weather warms up, it seems like our bats get moving a little bit more. But another guy that simply cannot buy a hit until Sunday. I predicted last week when was Austin Hedges going to get his first hit of the season. I said it was going to happen in the season. The series closing game on Sunday. He got his first hit. It was an RBI double, if I'm not mistaken.
Whopping
and now he's hitting a whopping 0.45. And for anybody that doesn't quite understand, that means he's only getting a hit 4.5% of the times he's stepping up to the plate. So
he got the first hit in the entire catcher's position.
Not even 1 in 10. Yeah, but we signed somebody, Luke Maley, right? He's not healthy enough right now, but Austin Hedges, he's got to come out and have the best week of his career, or things are going to get a little ugly. If you go 3 weeks into the major league season and you're batting underneath 100, what do you expect? What do you expect Tito to do?
He's just not even a threat, and that's what's crazy. Like he will walk once in a while, which is nice. At least you can get on base that way. And I know I wouldn't have much success if I tried to get in a major league batter's box, but I'm also not getting paid the money he is. Like you've made it up through the minors. You've played your whole life. Like there has to be a way you can just find a hole somewhere at some point. And then he tried to bunt the one day. And it's like, dude, you're not going to beat out a bunt. I don't care if the third baseman's playing and all the way in left field. You're still not going to beat that bunt out for a hit.
No, you're not. But, enough about the little breaks we're finding here in the offense, especially after the first week of the season. But what's going on with Aaron Savali? I certainly thought that he was going to be having an all-star season this year. In my early season predictions, I saw Plesac and Bieber having the strongest seasons, but I didn't expect Aaron Savali to get, knocked around the park as much as he has been. In his latest outing, he pitched 4 innings. He allowed 3 home runs. He had 5 strikeouts and a walk. But now, Mel, correct me if I'm wrong, is he 0-2 now or 0-1 with a no decision? It
He
just
has no
hasn't seemed like
decision.
he's really gotten into a groove. Right. He hasn't really gotten into a groove to really go his usual 6 to 7 innings, giving us a great shot to win the game. But like it probably is going for the hitters. We haven't exactly had the best weather in Cleveland, Kansas City, or Cincinnati. So I'm sure as the season moves forward, these guys get their arms a little bit more loose. We're going to be fine, but it's just a little bit out of his character. I wanted to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, I had him as a Cy Young dark horse before the season. Like, that's my guy. Like, I just envision consistency out of him because he's one of the smartest dudes out there. And he is a mastermind at perfecting his craft and knowing how his pitches work. And, he just doesn't look like the typical sharp Aaron Savali right now. And like you mentioned, I think the cold might have something to do with it. Just getting their arms stretched out, like those, you mentioned both of those, but I think the important thing is he's healthy. His velo looks fine. He did have 5 strikeouts and he was dealing on Sunday before he gave up that home run. Up until that inning, he was dealing. He had guys off balance. He was getting a lot of swings and misses, which he's not typically a guy who misses a bunch of bats. He's kind of a pitch to contact type of pitcher. So, I still think he's going to be all right. Obviously he's not starting as sharp as he did last season when, he was definitely going to be an all-star if he didn't get hurt. But, I think he's smart enough where he's going to go back into the lab and, he's really going to work on this and kind of get it back together.
Back in right field. Where does Mercado, Oscar Mercado, kind of land in you?
Yeah. So Max, you're breaking up.
Have a share.
You're breaking up a little bit. Maybe try shutting your video off for a minute. So Oscar Mercado, so again, this is the thing with Oscar Mercado. It's like you're either getting a home run or you're getting a strikeout. He doesn't really do much in between. Obviously, he's going to get the occasional double. Like I had people jumping me on Twitter like, "Oh, he just had a double." Yeah, blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while too. But he's only hitting 188 on the year. He's got 9 strikeouts and no walks, and that's the problem with his offensive profile. Is he's not going to walk. He's going to swing at everything. It may go over the fence or it may go into the catcher's glove and he's going to be walking back to the dugout. I just don't think he's a guy that should be playing every day. His value on this team is a late inning replacement due to his power potential and his above average defense. I saw last week, Tito chose to pinch hit Clement instead of Mercado. And there were, with some of the people I go back and forth with on Twitter, we were kind of having a great debate about it. Some people wanted that power potential from Mercado where, other people saw Tito's vision of like, what, we just need the contact skills of Ernie Clement. So I do think Mercado has value on this team. I just kind of think now that Naylor's back, Naylor should be playing in right field pretty much daily over Mercado as much as Naylor can handle. Mercado's fine for a spot start. If needed, but I don't think anybody needs to really sit in favor of Oscar getting at bats. And, it's important to note too, Nolan Jones is, probably mid-May, he's going to be starting his rehab from his ankle and, he might get some at bats in right field. And, it'd be really nice to see what our former #1 overall prospect brings to the mix out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry, I cut out there. I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties. So I do appreciate hanging in there with me. But, moving on to Ahmed Rosario in left field, that experiment seems to be done with. We played him 1 game out there where he did drop a ball in the outfield in that Kansas City loss. Kind of screwed over Shane Bieber. He was on a roll up until that point. But, with the way he uses his bat, and especially with Gabriel Arias and Andreas Jimenez working their way up onto the team, I think he's solidified himself at least a starting spot for, the remainder of the season. I don't really see him as being so much of a liability to put him on the bench because that bat is so valuable. So I was wondering, what you thought about him and his future this year, especially this season with so many young infielders coming up and making their way through the ranks, and our experiment of him being in the outfield seemingly being over for the time being.
So I think the discussion surrounding Ahmed Rosario is kind of fascinating because it's one of those debates where I can see both sides of it. I don't hate Ahmed Rosario, and I think he could have a lot of value on a team. I just get the feeling he just doesn't really fit on this team. And I know last year he was one of our best hitters, and it's not really saying much when our lineup struggled as much as it did, but when you look at his lines, he's, like I said earlier, he's pretty much he's a league average hitter when you look at OPS and things like that. And I just think defensively, it's tough to find him a position. And the issue I have with him as a shortstop is he just looks like a statue. Like, he's real stiff on the infield. Like, he doesn't have much range. He makes really easy plays look really difficult with spinning and doing all this other stuff. And I think his arm's average. I think it kind of gets played up a little bit, but I don't really agree with that experiment in the outfield necessarily being over yet. And here's why. So, I said it back to last year. They told him in his exit interview, you're going to be the shortstop, go take ground balls in the offseason. But they had to have known in the back of their head, look, we got all these middle infielders coming up. We should probably tell them to work out in the outfield. And they did the same thing to him last year, and we've discussed this on prior episodes. Like, you can't come into spring training and expect him to perfect the craft overnight. He needs reps out there. He needs to shag fly balls. He needs extra practice. Like, look at the Padres. They tried putting Tatis out in right field last year, and he looked bad. And it's because he was making so many errors at shortstop. They're like, we got to find a place for him. Maybe he's an outfielder. And Ahmed's fast enough where he could play in the outfield, and you can move Quan over to right. His arm will play just fine in left. And I think, especially with Straw in center, he could cover the ground. It's tough to judge him. That was his first start ever in left field. We know how big Kaufman Park is. And it was super windy that day. And not saying he shouldn't have caught it, because he absolutely should have caught that ball. And you're right, it did really affect Shane Bieber. I think the best version with the guys we have at the major league level right now, I don't know why they haven't tried him at second base. And I've heard a lot of Guardians podcasts kind of touching on this. I think he'd be a great second baseman. And Andres Jimenez, we know, is the better defender. You could let him play at his natural position. And, maybe Ahmed Rosario would be better on that side of the infield with the short throw to first base. I mean, I think it's worth a shot because I do think he brings value to this lineup.
Right.
I wonder how long he's going to be here, because he's down to that 2 years of control, exactly where Jose Ramirez was before he signed his extension. So, I do expect him to be traded at some point over the next year. And I do think he's going to bring you, a serviceable prospect back in return, simply because a team is going to value that bat that needs a middle infielder.
Right. And obviously he does have big shoes to fill. For the last, 5, 6, 7 years, the Guardians and the Cleveland Indians have been, a bit spoiled with Francisco Lindor and his defensive abilities. But then even before then, if I remember correctly, it was like Asdrubal Cabrera over there. He would switch between Johnny Peralta, and we've seen Asdrubal Cabrera. That's why I brought him up. There's a reason he's still playing. It's because he has that defensive value. I don't think Ahmed Rosario is quite there yet. He still is a young kid, but just to, he just needs to be more consistent. Maybe moving him to the other side of the infield is the right decision to make. But yeah, like you were mentioning, we have to make room for guys like Andres Jimenez, who is the better defender, who does have a valuable bat in the lineup. And then obviously as the season goes by, where we're going to have to start making room for Gabriel Arias to see what he can bring to the major league level. So
Yeah.
a lot of things to move around and make perfect throughout the season. But we are ripping on them early, and I mean it's the only thing we can do because we don't have that big of a sample size. But I expect this to be ironed out throughout the season. Not exactly worried about that. But one thing that we do need to focus on is what's going on in the back end of our bullpen. Because first couple games they were doing all right. Here and there weren't too many game-changing mistakes. But as the week did go on, I mean, we've seen Class A, who generally holds the closer spot in the ninth inning. He's pitched 2 overall innings pitched, 4 hits, 2 runs, a walk, 3 strikeouts, and a 9 ERA. So, moving down to Sandlin, 4 1/3 innings, 4 hits, 4 runs, 2 walks, 2 Ks, 8.31 ERA. And then that 7th inning spot, that's a huge hole that we've mentioned in weeks past. You have Brian Shaw and Logan Allen. They don't deserve to see any type of leverage in those types of situations. So is it going to be Karinchak when he gets back onto the field and gets his issues corrected? Like, not exactly sure if that's locked down yet.
Yeah, so I think it's just like it's a puzzle that you're like trying to wet the pieces with your finger to make them fit together. And we knew coming into the year this bullpen was going to kind of be out of sorts. Like, Emmanuel Clase, he's still Emmanuel Clase. He started last year slow too. I expect him to be okay, but Nick Sandlin just hasn't looked sharp. He's had a couple good outings, and then Saturday he just looked bad. He was wild, which is uncharacteristic of him, but I was kind of banking on him to be the 8th inning guy to kind of set Clase up. But Trevor Stephan has been incredible. I think he gets lost in the shuffle here, but I mean, his split looks incredible. Like, thank you, Blake Parker, for teaching him that before you headed out of town. But he's using it well. Yeah, like he's pitched, I think, the most innings at 5 with only allowed 2 hits, 4 strikeouts, no walks, which is huge. So I think he's kind of earned those high leverage 7th, 8th inning situations. And, I think from the left side, I think Anthony Gose is still a guy that intrigues me the most. I mean, Sam Hentges had like 2 wild pitches one game. I think it might have been in Cincinnati, but Anthony Gose, other than that 1 home run he gave up to Tyler Naquin, he's been pretty on point too. I mean, anybody who can throw 100, there's going to be a little bit of control issues, and he's still gaining that major league experience. But, I think he's got the tools to be a lockdown lefty in the back end of this pen, especially over Sam Hentges. But again, the guy I talked about a lot this offseason, Nick Mikolajchak, he's Columbus's closer right now in AAA, and he looks sharp. He's pitched 3 innings, only gave up 3 hits, 4 strikeouts, no walks, 2 saves. So I expect him to be here sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And speaking of guys that throw 100 miles an hour, we saw how that lack of control was affecting Emmanuel Clase last season as a rookie. Like, think about his first week on the team as opposed to where he finished, and now he's just our closer. Like, automatically, there's no question about it. I'm really excited to see where Gose can go this season. And, if he can find that groove, like you were saying, the only real mistake he's really made this season was that home run to Naquin. In the end, it didn't really affect us. It was already a blowout at that point, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, Nick Mikolajchak has been looking really sharp in AAA. 3 innings pitched, 3 hits, 4 Ks, 2 saves, hasn't given up any runs. So, a lot to be excited about, But, we do have a doubleheader slated tomorrow for the Cleveland Guardians. They're going to be facing off against the Chicago White Sox after these 2 straight days of postponements. It should be slated for Dallas Keuchel and Shane Bieber during the day, I would expect. And, I would expect that to also be followed up by what? Is it going to be Tristan McKenzie tomorrow? Or
I'm looking right now. So, yeah as of right,
and Lambert.
Yeah.
Yep. Right. So, tomorrow, a huge opportunity for us to get the ball rolling again, get us back into a good groove. Dallas Keuchel, he does have a 5.40 ERA this year. So he's always been a guy that has been knocked around a little bit. It just depends on if you get to him early. So it could be a great day at Progressive Field tomorrow. So, I mean, everybody should be pretty excited to get that going and some sunshine for, the first time in a little bit here in Cleveland. But I really wanted to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. We had a rough weekend, but we can only look forward. So thank you so much for listening. Always, please remember to shoot us a follow on BelievelandMediaLLC.com, as well as Twitter, and subscribe to all our subscribe to the podcast on all podcast platforms. You got, but thank you so much for joining us here tonight. I'll pass it off to my host, Mel. Take us away.
Yeah, so I just want to thank everybody for the continued support. I've had a few different people reach out on Twitter the last week or so saying how much they enjoy the podcast. So again, we really appreciate the support and the ratings and reviews we've gotten. And again, keep in mind while we continue to watch this team grow, just enjoy the little things. That's when this team's really competitive here in the near future, we can look back at these growth moments and, we're going to learn a lot about these young kids over these next couple weeks, but looking forward to getting back and seeing some baseball. The weather's looking a little better tomorrow, and then they head into Yankee Stadium over the weekend, Max. So, we'll switch the weather tracking over to you.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we get that Sunday game, and I've already bought tickets. I'm going to be sitting right over in the left field corner, some home run territory. Hopefully Jose can fetch me one, but yeah, I'm very excited to be joining everybody there. But yeah,
I think Garrett Cole's Garen Sunday.
Oh wow! Okay, here we go. Like, I bought the right day. It's always that 1 o'clock Sunday start, and it'll be a pleasure. It really will be.
All right, thank you everybody for listening. Go Guardians, and we will see you next week.